Hey PhDnD, I think this is the first time I've replied to one of your videos. Anyway, this is a reply to your video about say yes. So as I'm sure you're aware, the concept of say yes comes out of improv theater. This is where a person would introduce a new element and the other actors would have to accept it, or the scene would kind of come to a screeching halt at that point. Now, this applies to gaming, of course, because scene building is story building. Again, I'm sure we're all kind of aware of that on some level. In both cases, this actually really requires context as well. Saying yes necessarily isn't always going along with the rule. I'll give you an example. If you're playing a game where somebody owes money to a criminal with a fair bit of power and they say to you, that person's not very forgiving, are they? Saying yes they are actually goes against the idea that they just pitched at you that this is a very ruthless person. So saying yes isn't always saying yes. So role-playing games have adopted this as more of a yes but by introducing complications with that but. An example, do I know somebody in the underground? Yes, but they're in jail. A further step in this is something that I covered in my video on engaging the mechanics, which is the concept of say yes or roll the dice. This means that you say yes to everything that the players ask for, everything that they want out of the story, until there's a conflict, and then you roll the dice for that. It's actually more about making dice rolls meaningful, but it still plays off the same rule. Ironically, the author of that rule, Vincent Baker, his wife, Meg Baker, has written a game called Cyrun, which has more of a no, but this kind of a rule to it, where as you write your character, you write a couple questions that they don't know about themselves, and you can turn that over to the other players to answer for you. This means that the way that you've been seeing your character, somebody else says, no, you're not A, you're B. I'm going off on some tangents here, but I'm kind of a theory guy, so I do that. Now, as to your specific example with the flint and steel. Now, the questions I would ask you if a player says, I'm carrying flint and steel, right, to go around the rules, is to ask you, is your game about what items the players have in their pockets? Or would the story be made more interesting by this player not having an item? To me, those are the only questions that really matter in this instance. I can think of very few games that I have personally run where somebody would say, I have flint and steel, right? And I wouldn't say, sure. Maybe in Dread I'd ask them to make a pull from the tower to say that they do have it, or if there's some mechanic where they can roll their own resources, Burning Wheel does this sort of a thing, to retroactively do it. Again, Burning Wheel has a tendency to say, these are my instincts, and one of my instincts happens to be, I always have my traveling gear with me, and this is part of your traveling gear. Then it's a way around the rules in that game, designed to prevent a GM from watching the players for every time that they say that they do something versus when they say that they don't. Being that you're a PhDnD, I assume that you're playing a version of D&D, and in almost every version of D&D there are extensive item lists of what equipment you can bring into the dungeon with you. Now, some of the older versions seem a little bit more designed around the players outthinking the dungeon rather than their characters having the skills and the tactics to overcome it. And perhaps in that case, it is important for you to write on your character sheet every little item that your character has. Alternatively, you may just decide that that's not really what your game is about. Anyway, I hope this has helped. Anyway, keep asking these questions, and if you ever want my opinion on the meeting of minds, you know where to find me.